everybody, and welcome to a new podcast, Exploring Antinatalism, a new podcast initiated by one of your hosts, Mark J. Maharaj, who put this together, so thank you so much, Mark. There's never really been a real antinatalist podcast, and as the meme of antinatalism, anti-procreation, is growing and spreading in the world, some members of the antinatalist community, really thought it was high time that we come together and form a podcast. And we have all kinds of plans moving forward. We have lots of guests lined up. We have lots of discussions on the table that we think are very important to have. And so I'm really excited about this project. I know that everybody else is. Like I said, there's really never been a formal antinatalist podcast, and we thought it was high time. So if I didn't say before, my name is Amanda. I'm also known as Oldphan or Forever Wolf Films on YouTube, and I'm joined again by Mark J. Maharaj, Carlos, 10 of Spades, and Sterben. So I'm joined by some of my friends from the antinatalist community today, and we're going to do some introductions, get to some news stories, and yeah, excited to see how everything moves forward.
Okay, so for the first topic of our first podcast, we thought we'd just kind of introduce your hosts so you know a bit more about the people that are going to be with you as this podcast moves forward. And, we thought we would give an opportunity for everybody to speak a little about themselves and their experience with antinatalism and what it means to them. So I guess I'll just start with myself. My name is Carlos. I grew up in Portugal. I've lived in the UK for the past 13 years, and I lived in some other countries as well, sometimes because my parents moved there and I just kind of dragged along the times for my own free will. Growing up in Portugal, antinatalism is not really a topic you talk about. It's a very Catholic country, but it's a Catholic country with surprisingly very low birth rates. So I think there is an underlying skepticism about having children anyway. It totally wasn't a completely new concept to me as I grew up to kind of be critical of that. I think my first steps into antinatalism, besides, of course, observing the world and seeing, friends become parents and the experience, and of course, being a child and having parents myself, was, I guess, reading Schopenhauer when I was a teenager. I was very bored. This was before the internet. I don't know if you can imagine that. Long summer holidays, nothing to do, go into the library. This book has a funny man in the back cover with a funny haircut. Start reading, totally makes sense. Even the jargon wasn't that impenetrable. Then I kind of went through life. Having kids never kind of made sense to me as a life proposition, but I never kind of related that to anything bigger than they're not for me, but they might be for somebody else. A few years ago, I was looking for things to read, and I had stopped reading fiction for a long time. So I was kind of looking for kind of nonfiction things to read. I think I came across The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which is sort of a very good primer on antinatalism and pessimist philosophy. And even though it's not a very deep book, it's a book that kind of quotes and references lots of other material. So you can go from that book into other explorations. So since then, I've read, I would say, like the canon of antinatalism. And then I met other people online who shared the same views and debated with them and discussed these ideas. And so I guess here's where we are. 10 years ago, I became a vegan as a sort of a funny New Year's resolution. I didn't really know any other vegans at the time. So it wasn't peer pressure, it just seemed the right thing to do. It kind of aligned with antinatalism in a way. And I guess that's me. I'm in London, and we recently had our first ever London Anti-natalist meetup, which I hosted, and we'll be discussing that, I guess, in the news section. But yeah, so that's me.
Great, thanks, Carlos. And I'm Mark Maharaj. My anti-natalist journey started when I was introduced to veganism in 2014. So I grew up in Ottawa and Ontario, Canada. And in 2014, I started to question the whole vegan ethics stuff. And after a couple of months and I became vegan, I started to ask myself. A common slogan was that we were saving animals. And for me, I didn't actually think we were saving existing animals. I thought we were sparing animals from coming into existence. Once I thought about that, I thought about it more in terms of why don't we apply that to the human species if I'm not going to be speciesist? And that's when I became an antinatalist. And I think maybe 3 months into it, I came across the Ethalist movie, Amanda's movie, and the arguments in that movie really helped solidify the philosophy for me. And after that, I came out with I've always been an organizer of meetups as well. And I started a meetup in Ottawa, and the first meetup had about 9 people, and Trick showed up, Trick Slattery, and that was great. And then we had another one, and that didn't follow through. But this year we're starting again, and January 28th we're having another meetup. And so far, in the Ottawa meetup, we have about 29 members, and so far, at least we have 4 signed up, and I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, that's me. James, you want to go next?
Just as a little bit about myself, I was born and raised in England, still in England, unfortunately. I was kind of born into a tenuous family situation, single father, not a lot of money, kind of a welfare kid. So I was kind of disenfranchised with the idea of the family unit at kind of an early age. So pessimism and kind of a nihilistic philosophy came pretty early in my teens. It wasn't until about 16, 17 that I'd learned the term anti-natalism, anti-natalist, and I'd kind of started following the community more. And that's really where I started solidifying my ideas about ethics and animal rights, animal welfare, things like that. This is really my first foray into any sort of antinatalism, creating any sort of antinatalism media. And I guess you'd call it antinatalism activism in a sense. It's something I kind of hope to take further. I hope to get the word out, at least in my local community. Kind of challenge the mainstream idea of natalism, and really get more people questioning whether or not they should have children, both on an ethical basis and given kind of the dire ecological circumstances, kind of on a wider material basis. Regarding what I do in my spare time to promote this message, that's something I hope to work on, and I think that's pretty much me.
Amanda, did you want to give your story?
Okay, yes. So I'm Amanda Sukenick. I'm also known as Oldphan or Forever Wolf Films on various places on the internet. I have been an antinatalist since around 2010, 2011, when I discovered the YouTube videos of In Mendham, as well as people like Derived Energy. And during that time, the word antinatalism sort of, was already an existing word, obviously, because of David Benatar and other people, but there was this huge explosion of activity around the subject on YouTube during those years. So that was a very interesting time to kind of learn about antinatalism. And sort of since that time, I grew very inspired by the topic. And I made a movie about In Mendham's version of antinatalism, ethalism, called The Ethalist, and part of that movie went viral, so I was on the show Tosh.0 talking about antinatalism, and since that time I've just been doing all kinds of various projects around the subject. I combine the subject a lot with art. That's sort of my mode often of antinatalist activism, per se. I am involved. Well, I'm a moderator of the antinatalism subreddit, various Facebook groups to do with both antinatalism and ethalism, the ethalism subreddit as well. I am the current owner of Rogue Philosophy Antinatalism Discord. Antinatalism is a big part of my life, and I love doing projects around it, whether they be creative or more of an archiving nature. I have a huge collection of antinatalist videos saved from the last 10 years of antinatalist thought being produced on the internet. And yeah, I try to get involved with whatever I can. And I'm planning an event, hopefully this summer in Chicago, around the subject of antinatalism.
That's fine. I think we're waiting to hear from Sterben, right?
Yes, I go by Sterben online because my real name is pretty much too hard to pronounce. But yeah, I'm 28 years old. I'm in Oklahoma, and I got around knowing anti-natalism in about 2015-ish, and it stuck with me because I was going through a lot of changes in my life during that time. Because I started to change my name, and like I was going through like gender identity and other stuff like that. So and I was going through family issues, and I was just thinking about how anti-natalism was affecting my relationships with my family with that, since I was the only one who was thinking deeply at that time. So as I was beginning to think more about that, I wasn't involved with any other communities at that time. So I was just beginning around then. But around 2018, I started to trying to find more communities around anti-natalism because I wanted to get more involved with it. So I actually found Mark through his like interview. So I guess that was like around 2018, and I started like I guess I just started from there. So yeah, that's really my short story.
Well, thanks, Sterben.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any questions for anybody?
I think it would be good to gauge if everyone in here is an ethicist as well as an antinatalist, or just antinatalist, not necessarily an ethicist.
I'm an ethicist.
From my understanding of ethicalism, it's antinatalism applied to all species. So if that's the definition we're working with, I'm an ethicist. How about the rest of you?
Yeah, I'd say I'm also an ethicist.
Yes.
Yeah, I am, but I haven't spent enough time thinking about it to be 100% committed to it. If somebody asks me, I'll say yes. I'm more on the side of yes. I still haven't thought enough about it, but that's just how I work.
That's more than fair.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and personally, there's a lot of talk about the red button thought experiment, and I'm on the fence about that topic. I'm leaning towards more of a philanthropic antinatalism. How about the rest of you? Are you? I mean, you could technically be both, but where do you align?
Well, I am both. I mean, I think what the red button thought experiment does is like, wouldn't it be great if it was just easy, if you could just turn it off? And I think that's the biggest, takeaway from the red button that I think is important, because the philanthropic approach, which I'm very much for, is that like, yeah, what we really need to be doing is finding what ethical methods towards extinction. We need to figure out what ethical extinction looks like. Extinction where the least amount of harm leads, can be achieved, where extinction can be achieved. But I mean, I think what the red button thought experiment does is basically ask the question, I mean, wouldn't it be great if it could just be easy? I mean, if it could just get turned off, and should it get turned off? And so I think that's mainly the value of it. That's a big part of the value of it.
That's definitely been talked about in terms of like negative utilitarianism and the reductio in terms of that philosophy. When it comes to a type of like framework for ethics, do people prescribe to, say, negative utilitarianism or a different type of ethic?
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with negative utilitarianism, but I have some reservations about self-determination and the will of and freedom of people to make their own choices. There's, I mean, obviously, as an anti-natalist, I think, you know, giving birth and conceiving is a breach of somebody's rights, you know, the unborn. And certainly when they're conceived and born, then their rights have already been breached. So I'm against that, obviously. But with negative utilitarianism, a lot of the conversation I see is a step too far for me in terms of actually implementing those things. It would, you know, short of a total authoritarian state, a lot of those things would be impossible. So I do, in principle, agree with negative utilitarianism, and say with ethilism taken to its ultimate conclusion. But I do have reservations about a small group of people making decisions for the vast majority of people. So
Yeah.
that's where I stand.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, there's no question that in the red button thought experiment, you would be violating consent and you would be violating the social contract. And I mean, I think that is the biggest issue with the red button thought experiment. I think there's an argument to be made that to just end it might be worth the that ethical gray area. But again, that's a wider conversation I don't know that we're going to have today. But yes, I what I think really needs to happen is that it needs to be that ethicists are essentially pleading with the rest of the human race to try to come up with ways in which extinction could be achieved ethically. And I think that's the biggest goal, as opposed to some easy, way of escaping.
James and Sterben, what do you think?
I've heard the term graceful exit, and that's kind of a nice encapsulation of the idea, which I prefer. Initially, I was against kind of applying anti-natalism to other species, just on the basis that since time immemorial, humans have been violating the self-determinism of animals around them. Even more so today with industrial agriculture and things like that. It seemed to me kind of hypocritical and even further perpetuating the inequity to just assume that we have an entitlement to deny self-determination to other animals, especially. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't call it ethical to let them suffer in perpetuity, just endless perpetuity. So I would say I'm a pretty strong negative utilitarian and a pretty strong ethicist on that basis.
I mean, I'd rather be like pretty compassionate towards most things, but I'm pretty like red pill when it comes to like a lot of things as well. So I mean, I think I'm on the fence. So I don't know. I'm kind of undecisive.
I had a couple of other questions for people. In your own personal life, in terms of coming out as anti-natalist, do your friends know? Do your family know? How do you interact with people in your personal life?
So I'm married. I think on the host we have today, I think I might be the only one who's married, right? My wife is not an anti-natalist, but she, I guess, agrees with let's call it child-free movement, which is kind of runs parallel with anti-natalism with some similarities but some glaring differences. So I've come out as much as I can come out to her on anything. She knows kind of everything about me. And you know, she's okay with it. It just means we don't have babies. That's as far as it goes with her and what she's concerned with. With the rest of my family, no, not really. I mean, I guess I could talk about it with my parents, but it's only going to create grief, and you know, it's not like I should just go back and say, "Hey, I didn't ask for this. I really rather I had me given this gift." But that's not going to fix anything, right? That's not going to help either me or them go along with their life. So I definitely have not come out. In the other parts of my life, at work, no, absolutely not. I'm in a team that has lots of moms, some of them recent moms. I cannot imagine a scenario where people wouldn't just hate me and that would really impact my work life. But, I guess I could do it. I don't think I'm going to convince anybody either. So I'll have conversations with other people that have, let's say, no power over my income or like that. So friends, yeah, I'll definitely talk. I've talked about it before as well. And certainly I'm creating like, the fact I'm using my real name here and I have a Twitter with my real name where I talk about anti-natalism, then yeah, I guess I'm comfortable talking about it, just not with my parents specifically and people at work.
I don't think I could hide it at this point if I wanted to. So, I mean, my family knows. I mean, my mother came to the premiere of The Ethalist. So, if you Google my name, you're going to get all kinds of antinatalist stuff. There's no way of disconnecting it. Most of the friends, well, no, I mean, all of my friends know that I'm an antinatalist. A ton of the friends that I have, I met at graduate school where ethalism and antinatalism were my thesis project. So they're very well aware of what I'm interested in and all about the philosophy. Yeah, I don't care. I'll tell anybody that I'm an antinatalist and ethicist. And I've had all kinds of responses from that. And yeah, but I mean, and the vast majority of them is, I mean, if they're, people maybe don't like it, but they at least think that it's interesting. I certainly don't shove it down anybody's throat. There are situations where I wouldn't bring it up. Absolutely. I mean, I did not tell my 92-year-old grandmother that I was an anti-natalist because I didn't think she was at a point where she could understand what that would be. But, my work I do is mainly freelance and people are very well aware. But if I was in a certain types of employment, I don't think I would bring it up. I don't think work is really the best place to, discuss your personal interests and whatnot or philosophy in most cases. But yeah, I am somebody that does encourage being open about your antinatalist beliefs if you want, it's something that you want to do, and if indeed it is safe for you to. I do think there are people that are in situations where it's probably not the best idea, but I sort of hope that people will take their antinatalism as a piece of their lives that they make for themselves, so to speak. If we are all imposed on to be here. And I think that, again, if it's something that you wish to do, it should be something that in your life you put some insistence on, because, perhaps your words may have some influence on preventing somebody else very much like you from existing again. So yeah, I'm very for people being open about it, but I also understand when people can't be.
From a personal standpoint, it's not something I generally discuss too often. A few of my close friends know my stance on antinatalism, and probably one or two of my closest friends agree with me on the proposition of antinatalism. I have made arguably the mistake of bringing antinatalism up casually to a work colleague, and that didn't go too well. Obviously, your mileage may vary, but things like street epistemology is something I do hope to look into more, and it's something I do hope to start discussing on a more frequent basis, especially in a more logical, thought out way to address and dispute the common reactions that people might have to the idea.
I have not told my family for the simple fact they're not open-minded about a lot of things. My friends, however, they do know about it, and they're very much open-minded about that and plenty other topics. So we do discuss that. a lot, and they do agree with anti-natalism, and they, for the most part, about 85% of them are vegan. So I do relate a lot of my side projects such as this with them. And it's very enlightening that I can talk to them about it. So I'm very happy that I do have at least friends that I can share this information with. As far as work goes, I I don't discuss it at all because it's kind of like I don't know whether they would be like willing to accept it or not. So it's just that I wouldn't bring it up to them or not. And then as far as college goes, I probably wouldn't bring it up there either.
So I started off talking about it with my friends as a type of thought experiment and just asking them questions of what they thought about the philosophy, and just coming in with it in a more inquisitive fashion really opened up the conversation in my social circle. Um, Pretty much everybody's been very receptive to having the conversation. I think they think it's a weird philosophy and they want to explore it some more. I've actually got more heat and actually lost a few friends because of my veganism. So I had more judgment through veganism than my anti-natalism. Um, Now I've talked to my friends and family, and when I did the interview for the Daily Mail, I did confirm with my supervisors if this was okay, and they said it was fine. And I, even though my friends, family, and work know, I still was very nervous. And the more out there I am, the more comfortable I'm starting to become with it. And um, seeing people's YouTube videos where they actually show their face was really helpful. So I was exposed to Amanda and Dana Wells, the Friendly Anti-natalist and Ethicological, and seeing them like really helped, and even Gary. And it was, I felt like, okay, I can put myself out there as well. And now that I have put myself out there, I feel uh, a little bit more content because I don't feel like I'm um, hiding something that I do believe in, and really happy that my friends are receptive to the information. And in December was my birthday, and at my birthday, people were asking me about the podcast, even though they don't even, a lot of them don't agree with this, but they're excited for to hear about everybody's views and the philosophy some more. So it's been mostly a positive experience for me, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's great.
Great.
Yep. So there was so going through the community event side of it, there was a meetup Monday 13th of this month in Toronto, Ontario. It was with the Toronto existentialists. I don't know if you're involved in that, Mark.
I'm not. No, I'm in Ottawa.
Okay. That was on meetup.com. Event 267-300-435. In case anyone's in the local area would like to get into contact with those, the organisers. There was a meetup in the City of London, Wednesday 15th of this month, so last Wednesday. And that was, I believe that had a pretty good turnout. Danny Shine and Carlos had been the organisers. Carlos, if you'd like to give us more information on that, how did it go?
Yeah, so we organized it through meetup.com using, thankfully, some of the funding we put together for the podcast and the community. I had no idea what was going to happen, who was going to show up, but very quickly, in about, say, 3 weeks of having the meetup group set up, we had just over 30 people signing up. And then for the first meetup, I set it for like a Wednesday evening because Wednesday didn't seem to be a very popular time for other meetups. So I didn't want to conflict with other dates on the meetup calendar. And we had 12 people show up, which I thought was really impressive for a first ever meetup. I mean, it was a complete unknown quantity, right? So even I, as an organizer, wasn't sure what was going to happen. Out of those 12, 2 were there, I guess, for the wrong reasons. One of them was there because she was just a fan of Danny Shine's videos. And she thought it was just going to be like a prank, another prank video like he usually does, but it wasn't. So she was kind of disappointed. And as soon as she heard the words anti-natalist and atheist, she kind of made her excuses and left. And there was another gentleman that had some interesting views on aliens, ley lines, and other very alternate views of the world. But I kind of tried to steer him back into the conversation by asking him to remain on topic, the topic being antinatalism, before we got dragged into lizard people and Atlantis and the configurations of slaughterhouses and the Houses of Parliament. But anyway, he left after a while too, because I don't think we were his crowd. So there remained 10 people who were, I was quite surprised, everybody was kind of clued up in antinatalism from one source or another. They certainly knew kind of the jargon, I guess, around antinatalism. I prepared like a little sheet on Introduction to Anti-natalism with some channels on YouTube that recommend some books for people to take away. I think that's helpful because, you always kind of can bring a new perspective to people. And now we've started a WhatsApp group with people from that meetup, so we can kind of exchange news with each other. I'll definitely set up another meetup for next month. I think once a month seems good. There are already a few projects brewing up among members. So Danny, he's got his own brand on YouTube. And obviously Danny has got some plans, things he wants to do on YouTube with antinatalism and kind of on the street, as usually does. And he's kind of recruiting people from among the group to kind of help him out and do things. So there might be some very, so a lot of antinatalist content is people talking to a microphone in the comfort of their own home. Danny obviously doesn't follow that prescription. So I think there'll be quite a lot of things along those lines coming up in the next couple of months from him, with the help kind of from the group as well. But overall, yeah, I had a great time. I mean, it's very rare for me to talk about this subject in public anyway, let alone with people who actually know what I'm talking about. So it was great. I'll do more one in next month, and maybe start trying to get a feel from the people who show up what they want to do with the group. If it's like an activism group or it's just people getting together, having a beer and talking about it. And I'll kind of let the group decide and see where it's going. So that's what happened.
Great. And on to the last meetup, Ottawa Child-Free and Anti-natalist. That's Tuesday, January 28th. And that is being organised by Mark. Mark, if you could give us some more details on that.
Yeah, so it'll be at the Royal Oak at Bank in Gloucester. And I reached out to a child-free group in Ottawa, and some members will be showing up from there as well. And the plan is just show up and have a bit of a social and a few drinks and get to know everybody. And so far, it looks like a couple of people that are into the child-free movement and into the environmental movement are coming. So I'm really looking forward to meeting some new people and figuring out what we're going to do with the group. But I'm a big fan of the in-person meetups and seeing people face to face and developing community. So I'm really excited about this.
Great. Is there any comments, any other meetups in the works?
I am trying to get a meetup of some kind or another planned for this summer, probably between July 20th to July 30th, somewhere in between there. I'd like to do some sort of like event. I'm thinking of, if possible, it's all a matter of what I'm going to be able to pull together, but I'd like to like rent some sort of little space. And, my best friend actually wrote an anti-natalism play. I'm hoping that maybe I can get a reading of that play for the event. Maybe have some guests, come speak to a crowd through Skype and whatnot. I got a lot of goodies planned. I just don't know exactly how the chips are going to fall. But I definitely want to get, events, lectures, that kind of thing started in Chicago in the near future. I should probably do some building up to that before July, with small meetups, like just getting a drink or something with people. So I'll probably do some of that in the near future too. But yeah, I definitely want to move, more towards offline antinatalist activism, as well as the online stuff, not in an attempt to abandon the online activism. But I do think that the face-to-face antinatalism is very important.
And speaking of the online stuff, the monthly Hangouts are still going on. We've stopped recording them because we're going to have the podcast now. The next meetup will be on February the 8th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If anybody would like to join, just send me a message on social media. On Twitter, I'm Green Rebel 10, and on Facebook, Mark J. Maharaj. And you could also find me on the Discord server, Rogue Philosophy.
Brilliant. If there are no further comments, I'd like to go on to a few news articles from around December 2019 to January of this year. Just generally around fertility rates and comments tangentially relating to antinatalism. The first news story is from ABC News, and it says, US fertility rates fall to record low. Quote, the total fertility rate in the US, the number of births that a woman is expected to have over her lifetime, is at 1.73, an all-time low, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This rate is well below the 2.10 birth rates per woman needed for a generation to replace itself, according to the CDC. And further to that, however, it is important to note that the article goes on to say that the women are still going to have children. It's just that the time that people would generally reproduce is kind of been pushed back, so they'll be having children later in life. And it also states that research shows that there has been no change in the number of children women say they intend to have. So effectively, we could most likely point to material causes, people not having as much disposable income or financial security, both partners having to work full-time jobs, things like that. Secondly, there is...
Sorry, James. Sorry to butt in, but there's a quote from that article that I found really interesting. When the representative from the CDC says that as those shifts continue, we're going to start seeing the fertility rate hopefully rebound and correct itself, which is a very prescriptive, normative statement to say, as if there was like a normal fertility rate, as if there was like the sheer concept of having a regular fertility rate that would apply to American women. It just seems like something we can perhaps explore later on. Why is there this idea, in this case from CDC, from in this case a PhD assistant professor of population, family, and reproductive health, to assume that there's such a thing as a correct fertility rate? It's something interesting to explore further, I think. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. And I think as you say, the fact that replacement rate, replacing the population, I believe the population of America is 370 million, probably a questionable assumption. And the fact that as antinatalists, we may say, okay, birth rates are low across the board, but that's only 1 year out of that number is expected to uptick again back to replacement rates or near enough as people begin to have children older in their life or later in life. If there are no further comments, the second news story, this is from BBC and also Financial Times. Hungary says it will offer free fertility treatments to counter population decline. Hungary's national right-wing Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, said during an international news conference Thursday that IVF treatments will be provided for free starting February 1st. The government recently purchased 6 private fertility clinics, and Orbán said that the fertility sector is of, quote, national strategic importance. He later went on to say, if we want Hungarian children instead of immigrants, and if the Hungarian economy can generate the necessary funding, then the only solution is to spend as much of the funds as possible on supporting families and raising children. Personally, I find that quote disturbing on two fronts other than antinatalism. The Hungarian babies instead of immigrant babies, I find personally kind of revolting, but I can't say. I believe this isn't a new precedent for far right, especially conservative governments, to have this strong family quote approach.
Yeah, they're usually not this open about it, but I think there's an underlying sentiment along these lines that fertility rates matter when it's our people, and matter as in we have to increase our people and decrease other people, right? So I don't think this is anything new, and it kind of aligns a lot with natalist propaganda, even from people who I wouldn't say are openly right wing, but often there's such a preference for having our genes in the next generation rather than the genes of other people, as in have our own biological babies instead of adopting. And I think there's something there, definitely, the correlation. It's just that people usually don't express it as openly as Viktor Orban from Hungary.
Yeah, kind of an uncomfortable case of kind of overt tribalism displayed there. Secondly, Japan's birth rate hits another record low in 2019. Probably not anything surprising. Less and less people in Japan are having children, and it's an aging population. I'm not entirely aware of Japan's current plan to try to combat that. I'm sure they will. Whether it be influx of economic migrants or some sort of government fertility program, as Viktor Orban has proposed. I guess that remains to be seen, but this has been going on for years now, and I don't see an end in sight, which is most likely, from an anti-natalism perspective, probably a positive. Kind of further to that, another news story: alarming low birth rate shut down schools in Greece. Secretary General of the Federation of Secondary School Teachers of Greece, OLME, told Ethnos that the demographic problem is now at our doorstep, quote unquote. He goes on to say, thousands of young people are moving abroad, as in Greece they can no longer work and create a family. The government must support motherhood, not only with benefits, but also with other incentives, such as kindergartens, support for new parents, etc. Kind of echoing, not in probably perhaps the most nationalistic terms, but echoing what Viktor Orban is proposing with a push towards government fertility treatments and funding for new families. It's also interesting that they would outline the declining economic state of Greece in recent years as contributing to people moving out of Greece, migrating away.
Yeah, a lot of countries in Southern Europe have this issue of these, schools closing, and a lot of things which were built for, I would say, high birth rate countries. Kind of these facilities then don't make any sense. And economics is definitely a part of it, but there's also women's emancipation in those countries. Countries like, for example, Greece, Portugal, Spain, and so on. They had, extremely low literacy rates for women throughout the 20th century, and education opportunities. And as soon as those women started, being allowed, say, to have their own bank accounts and to have a career and just have more roles in society rather than just be a mother, then they opted out of having babies, or delayed having babies to extremely late in their lives, which meant they had just one instead of 5 or 6. And these societies were built for women who have 3, 4, 5 babies. And now there are too many schools. There's just too many things for children which are not needed anymore, but which cause also kind of great issues with taxes and how you support a pension system that relies on more people being born every year than you had before. Yeah, back to you, James.
Definitely. As you say, I think there's a strong correlation between as people and governments become more secular, and as kind of regressive policies and views on male and female gender roles kind of decrease. Then we see birth rates go down as people prefer to pursue careers, pursue some sort of financial independence. And I think it's interesting as we see kind of the scales of that begin to shift with, for example, the rise in far-right nationalism, to see what exactly is going to happen. I can't say I'm too optimistic that that trend, the population rate will continue to decrease, but who's to say? So the final news story, this is from the Telegraph. £1 pill could stop women from suffering miscarriage, study finds. The new study used a diabetes drug called sitagliptin to attempt to inhibit an enzyme which affects circulation of stem cells in the womb. In the trial, 38 women aged 18 to 42 who had experienced a large number of recurrent miscarriages, 5 on average, were given either a course of sitagliptin or a placebo for the 3 menstrual cycles. Those given the drug saw their stem cell count increase by an average of 68%, with a 50% decrease in the number of, quote, stressed cells present in the lining of the womb. Scientists now hope to carry out clinical trials to see if this cuts miscarriage rates. I believe that article pretty much speaks for itself. I don't have anything further to comment, and that should conclude the news section. With regards to a more community focused, I guess one of the biggest videos on antinatalism that I could find is Matt Dillahunty's video, quote, Answering Antinatalism, in which he goes on length attempting to critique David Bentar's asymmetry argument. I know Glynos had a very good response video to that, which I felt was pretty in-depth and pretty concise. And recently, Life Sucks had also released a video talking to college students about antinatalism, where he essentially engaged engineering students on a discussion about ethics, negative utilitarianism, antinatalism, and ethilism, which I thought was very illuminating. And I believe that's concluded it.
Also, Alex O'Connor from Cosmic Skeptic just had a conversation with Humane Hancock on anti-natalism, and that's been getting a lot of views. So that's also out there.
Okay, everybody, this concludes episode 1 of Exploring Antinatalism. I'd like to thank everybody that joined us today for our first inaugural episode. Thank you so much to everybody that shared news stories, shared their stories of their how they became antinatalists today. I'd like to make a special thank you to Curb Your Optimism, Kirby, without whom this project would not have been possible. She did accomplish the amazing feat of setting up a GoFundMe fundraiser for the podcast, as well as some of these meetups that are happening around the world. And she successfully managed to raise the full amount to make this podcast happen today. So again, without you, Kirby, we could not have done this. Thank you so much for all of your efforts in getting this up and running. If you'd like to follow Curb Your Optimism, you can follow her on YouTube at Curb Your Optimism on YouTube. She is also on Twitter. You can reach her at Call Me Kirby. On Twitter. If you'd like to follow news in regards to this podcast, please join us on the Exploring AN Twitter. And we'd also like to send a very special thank you to Life Sucks, who also has a YouTube channel and is a remarkable artist and provided the artwork for this podcast. So thank you so much, Life Sucks. So thank you to everybody for being with us today. We're very excited for episode 2. We will not reveal just yet what we have in store, but some exciting things. And so we look forward to speaking with everybody again. Each episode will be different. We'll have new people on, different guests, different hosts. So please join us again next time. Thank you so much, everybody, again. All the best and bye for now. Take care, everybody.